Stop. Give me 60 seconds and I'll show you something wild. I built a tiny farm at home using only kitchen waste. No store-bought soil, no fancy gear, no secret hacks, just the stuff you and I toss every day. Banana peels, eggshells, coffee grounds, onion skins, wilted greens, the sad potato at the back of the drawer. If that sounds gross, stick with me. In 4 weeks, those gross scraps turned into fresh herbs, crunchy greens, and a loop that feeds itself. I set one rule: feed the soil first, then let the soil feed me. Simple, cheap, fast. Here's how it started. I put a bowl on the counter and named it the future farm bin. Every peel, shell, and scrap went in. I rinsed eggshells and left them to dry because dry shells don't smell. I tore banana peels into strips so they'd break down faster. I spread used coffee grounds on a plate for a few hours so they wouldn't clump. I saved onion skins and dropped them in warm water to steep into a light tea. I even kept the water from washing rice. Nothing fancy, just small moves that add up. I promised myself one afternoon to set up the whole thing. That promise mattered. No endless research rabbit hole, no shopping list. I took a clean bucket, poked some air holes near the top, and started layering. Shredded paper, a handful of scraps, a sprinkle of crushed eggshell, a pinch of dry coffee grounds, more paper. Paper keeps the mix from getting soggy. Shells add calcium. Coffee gives a soft boost and keeps smells down. I pressed it all down gently, put on the lid, and felt like I had just fed a little engine. Then I set a timer for 4 weeks. I wanted proof fast. A bowl of greens, some herbs, maybe garlic shoots, maybe microgreens. I walked to my fridge and looked with new eyes. Green onions with a bit of root left. Save them. A romaine core with a tight center. Save it. Celery base? Save it. A clove of garlic starting to sprout. That's a plant begging for a home. From the pantry, I grabbed a spoon of dry mung beans and lentils for microgreens. From the spice rack, whole coriander and mustard seeds. If it's whole and not roasted, there's a chance it will grow. I set out a few old containers, cans, yogurt cups, takeout boxes, and poked holes in the bottom. No soil? Fine. I made a starter mix: torn, soaked, and squeezed cardboard, a handful of dry leaves from the balcony, a pinch of old potting soil from a dead plant, and a scoop of the youngest compost from the bucket. It looked rough, not pretty, but it felt springy and alive. Plants don't need perfect, they need air, moisture, and a bit of life. I took a breath and grinned. Trash into food, waste into a habit, 4 weeks on the clock, let's grow. Now I needed a place for all this to turn into real food, and I kept it simple: 1 compost bucket and 1 worm bin. The compost bucket was just a clean paint bucket with a lid. I poked air holes near the top with a screwdriver. Air is life for this process. At the bottom I laid a cushion of dry paper strips and torn cardboard. Think of these dry bits as the browns. They soak up moisture and stop smells. On top I added a small handful of kitchen scraps, the greens, banana peel pieces, a few veggie ends, a spoon of coffee grounds, a pinch of crushed eggshell, then more dry paper. I built 3 small layers like a lasagna, pressed it down gently, misted it if it looked too dry, and shut the lid. That was it. No big science, just balance. If it looks wet, add dry. If it looks dry, add a little water. The worm bin was a shallow plastic tub with holes in the lid. I filled it with a soft bed, soaked and squeezed cardboard until it felt like a wrung-out sponge. I sprinkled a tiny pinch of old soil to add microbes. I added a small handful of red wigglers I got from a friend. You can skip worms if you don't have them, but if you do, they speed things up and make amazing plant food. I fed them very lightly at first. 1 thin strip of banana peel, a few coffee grounds, a couple of soft veggie bits under the bedding. I always covered fresh scraps with cardboard so flies couldn't find them. The rule I repeated to myself: if it smells, I fed too much. If it's dry, I didn't mist enough. Every few days I did a quick check. I opened the compost bucket, mixed it with a stick to bring air inside, and looked for signs of progress. Heat, a clean earthy smell, scraps fading into a dark mix. If I saw big wet clumps, I added more paper and stirred. If I saw fruit flies, I buried new scraps deeper and kept the lid on tight. I never added oily food, meat, or dairy. That stuff belongs in the trash, not the bucket. The worm bin needed even less. I lifted a corner, peeked under the cardboard blanket, and smiled when I saw worms hiding from the light. If I saw shiny wet patches, I fluffed the bedding. If the top looked dry, I misted it. I fed a little once or twice a week, never more than they could finish in a day or two. A lemon peel once in a while was fine, a pile of citrus was not. Coffee grounds were okay in small amounts. Eggshell powder helped keep things stable. I also started a tiny routine to make scraps easier to digest. I chopped them small. I kept a freezer save bag for peels. Freezing breaks the cell walls and helps them break down faster later. Before adding frozen scraps, I let them thaw and drained off the extra water so I didn't swamp the bin. After 2 weeks, both systems felt steady. The compost bucket shrank and warmed. The worm bin smelled like clean soil after rain. A little dark liquid sometimes collected at the bottom of the compost bucket. I diluted a spoonful in a big bowl of water and used it on plants that looked hungry. If it ever smelled strong, I skipped using it and added more dry paper to the bucket to reset the balance. By the end of the month, I could scoop a handful from the worm bin and see soft, crumbly castings. That was my plant boost. I sprinkled a thin layer on my pots and watered it in. The mix was rich but gentle, and the plants showed me right away with brighter leaves and steady growth. 2 cheap containers, some paper, and kitchen scraps. That's all it took to turn waste into fuel for the mini farm. While the scraps were breaking down, I went seed hunting in the kitchen. This is the fun part, because it feels like finding hidden plants in plain sight. I pulled out a bunch of green onions with a little white root still on them. I grabbed a celery base, a romaine core, and a garlic bulb with 1 clove starting to sprout. I checked the fruit bowl and found a knob of ginger with a small eye. From the pantry I scooped a spoon of mung beans and another of lentils for fast microgreens. I shook the spice jars, and found whole coriander and mustard seeds. If a seed is whole and not roasted, there's a good chance it will sprout. That rule opened the door to a lot of options without buying a thing. I set up a simple holding station on the counter. For green onions, I filled a glass with just an inch of water and stood the roots in it. For celery and romaine, I set the bases in shallow bowls with enough water to touch the bottom but not drown them. For garlic and ginger, I used a small tray, lined with a damp paper towel, just to wake them up. For the dry beans, I soaked them overnight in jars, then drained them the next morning and tilted the jars at an angle so air could move. By the second day, little white tails showed. Free sprouts. Free food. I needed a starter mix to plant in, and I still didn't want to buy soil. I made a small batch with what I had, soaked, squeezed cardboard torn into small bits, dry leaves I crumbled by hand, a pinch of old potting soil from a dead plant, and a scoop of half-done compost from my bucket. I mixed it with my hands until it felt springy and light. It looked rough, sure, but it had air and life. That's what roots want. If you don't have any old soil, even a spoonful from a clean garden edge is enough to seed the mix with microbes. Treat it gently, and put it back later if you can. I turned empty containers into planters. Cans, yogurt cups, takeout trays, anything with depth. I poked holes in the bottom with a nail for drainage, and set them on plates to catch drips. I filled them with the mix and watered until a little ran out the bottom. Then I planted. Green onion bases went root down with the cut end just above the surface. I kept celery and romaine in water a few more days until tiny roots formed, then moved them into the mix. Garlic cloves went pointy side up, an inch deep. Ginger sat just under the surface, eye facing up. I pressed coriander and mustard seeds into the top half-inch and misted them. For microgreens, I spread the soaked mung beans and lentils on a shallow tray lined with a damp paper towel, rinsed and drained twice a day, and watched a soft green mat form in under a week. I fed everything with gentle scrap tea. Banana peels soaked in water for 2 days, then diluted for a light drink. Onion skins soaked overnight for a golden tea I used once a week. A small sprinkle of dry coffee grounds scratched into the top of the mix every couple of weeks. Crushed eggshell powder around garlic and romaine for a steady calcium lift. Nothing exact. I watched the leaves and adjusted. Pale, a sip of banana peel water. Slow, a dusting of worm castings once I had them. Too wet. Skip a day, and let the top dry. By the end of the first week, the green onions shot up, the romaine center turned neon, the celery pushed new stalks, and the sprouts made the kitchen smell fresh. All of it from scraps I used to toss. That's when it hit me. The farm had already started. Week 2 is where the rhythm clicks. Every morning takes 5 minutes. I lift the lid on the compost bucket, give it a quick stir with a stick, and listen for that soft, earthy smell. If it looks a bit wet, I toss in a handful of shredded paper and fold it through. If it looks dry, I miss the top and close the lid. The worm bin barely needs me. I peel back the cardboard blanket, check that the bedding feels like a wrung-out sponge, then tuck it back in. If I can't smell anything, that's perfect. Quiet bins are happy bins. The plants start talking in little ways. Green onions grow a fresh inch every couple of days. The romaine center gets that highlighter green glow. Celery lifts its new stalks like it's stretching after a nap. Garlic shoots thicken and stand tall. I take tiny harvests instead of big cuts, snip a few onion tops, pinch a few coriander greens, trim a small handful of microgreens. Taking a little often keeps everything growing. It also keeps me patient. I don't need a giant harvest today. I just need it to keep going. Feeding is gentle and simple. Once a week I use onion skin tea or a diluted banana peel soak. A small sprinkle of dry coffee grounds gets scratched into the top of the mix every couple of weeks. Crushed eggshell goes around garlic and lettuce for calcium. I don't overdo it. When leaves look bright and steady, I back off. When a plant looks pale, I give a light sip of banana peel water. This is cooking by taste, but for plants, I test small ideas. In one pot, I tuck a thin strip of banana peel under the top layer of soil and watch. In another, I add a spoon of half-finished compost and see if growth speeds up. No lab here, just a window ledge and a timer. I keep notes in my head. That pot perked up after peel day. This one liked a dusting of eggshell. Microgreens grow stronger when I rinse and drain twice a day, not once. Little tweaks, big payoff. Pests show up once or twice, and I handle them like a calm routine. A couple of fungus gnats. I add a dry leaf crumble mulch and let the top inch dry for a day. They leave. A sour whiff from the compost bucket. Too many wet scraps. I mix in more paper, stir, and close the lid. A few fruit flies near the worm bin. I bury fresh food deeper and cover with cardboard. Problem solved. Most issues are just balance checks. More air, more dry, or a pause on feeding. By week 3, the worm bin turns the bedding into soft, dark castings. I lift a corner and see tiny baby worms and that crumbly chocolate cake texture everyone talks about. I take a small handful and top dress each pot. The next few days, leaves look richer. The garlic greens turn glossy. The romaine gets crisp edges. It's like the plants took a deep breath. Week 4 feels like a mini jungle. I can make a real meal from it now. I harvest a bunch of green onions, a handful of coriander greens, a cup of mung bean microgreens, and some tender celery tops. Quick toss in a hot pan, just a minute or two. Salt, pepper, squeeze of lemon. It tastes bright and clean. I look at the scraps bowl and smile. Nothing in here is trash anymore. It's next week's fuel. The habit is the win. Toss scraps, layer smart, water when needed, small harvests often. Feed the soil, and the soil feeds you back. Keep it simple, keep it steady, and watch the loop turn leftovers into